25 years of my life, I've dabbled into what feels like a barrage of fighting games where nothing matters except laying the smack down on the person right in front of you. Rapid punches, jump kicks all around, flashy as all hell combos. It was always cathartic, just relieve some stress. Maybe it's not a good idea to punch that annoying coworker in the face, but I'm sure Mr. Big here wouldn't mind a fireball to the chest. Nowadays, there's a surplus of fighting games, and the more technology advances, the more dynamic and stylized they get. Witness up to 3 fighters join together to perform a super move in Marvel vs. Capcom, or watch in awe at the kind of combos you can pull off in Blaze Blue. It's all good stuff, and I'll happily go back to these when I can, but today I'm going to pay my respects to the series that's pretty much responsible for kickstarting this genre into the popularity it flourishes in today. Yep, I'm talking Street Fighter. If it's not Capcom's most profitable series, it certainly has to be at least top 3. And since 1991, it's been one of the premier fighting game franchises that people of all ages can enjoy to knock each other's lights out, whether they're CPU or friends, or maybe they can just earn some large cash prizes at tournaments like at EVO. Now, this video won't be an entire compendium of Street Fighter lore. I just went numb at the thought. I'm focusing on the mainstream series and what I personally grew up with, so mainly the number titles and some other things I'll spend some time on. It's a personal retrospective, not so much an encyclopedic retrospective. But why a retrospective at all? I have my reasons. Since 1991, the Street Fighter series has grown and evolved to fit the times, but let's be clear here, we're not talking about aged cheese transforming into a fine wine. No matter the game, the goal is to always pick your favorite character and beat the shit out of your opponent. Biggest changes are often roster related or new mechanics that give the game its own identity but rarely change the whole foundation, like Madden or Call of Duty. So odds are if this particular Street Fighter didn't convince you or that particular Street Fighter didn't convince you, the other games may be hard pressed to change your mind. Hey, Street Fighter is just one of many fighting games out there. If it's not the one for you, there's bound to be something out there that you can enjoy. Might I recommend Blaze Blue? And even so, I'm only speaking as a casual Street Fighter fan. Yeah, for as long as I've been playing it, I don't consider myself an expert on this sort of thing, and I'm sure there's some tournament level player out there that can write a fucking Bible on how Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo is radically different than Street Fighter 2 Turbo. But I don't really care about that sort of thing for this video. I'm just here to sit back, drink this coffee, share my stories with these games, and if you like what you see, you might want to try them out yourself. And I want to start where I started, with Street Fighter 2 on the SNES, but shockingly, this is not where the series started. I know that's like, well, no shit, genius, but would you believe a lot of people didn't even realize there was a Street Fighter 1? It's not as far-fetched as you may think. Firstly, I think these arcade cabinets were extremely rare even during the early 90s. I recall only seeing one a long time ago at a movie theater that doesn't even exist anymore. And secondly, when the game was ported to consoles in 1988, and by that I mean an actual port on something like the TurboGrafx CD and not something on the Commodore 64, the name was changed from Street Fighter to Fighting Street. And you know that anyone that lives in Fighting Street begins their morning by shattering a brick wall with their bare hands. I do not currently own a TurboGrafx CD, but Fighting Street is on the Wii Virtual Console. And I know I just said this was more of a personal look back, but I gotta look at the game that, like it or not, started this whole shindig. So come on, let's give Fighting Street a... Oh fuck! Oh, stop, goddammit, stop! So, Fighting Street, where you face off against a group of late 80s cultural archetypes from different regions and pray to God your attacks actually fucking connect. Some of these guys will make very short work of you, complete with the same quote every time you lose, and no matter who you lost against, it's always the same voice clip.
You've got a lot to run before you beat me. Try again, kid.
I wish there was a female fighter here, because I know if I lost to her in this game, she'd have the same fucking voice clip.
You've got a lot to run before you beat me. Try again, kid.
There's only one character to choose, and it's Ryu, sporting a mop of red hair and, believe it or not, actual footwear. This is the first game, alright. His best friend Ken is also in this game, but he's only available in 2-player mode, and who the hell would want to play this game with me? You have 2 attack buttons, a punch and a kick, and depending on how long you hold the button down and release it, you can deliver attacks of varying strength. Of course, if you're actually playing this game, that doesn't really matter, because you'll be spending all your time jumping like a fucking grasshopper and button mashing, hoping your opponent goes down before you do. You're just trading blows with combat that sports no combo system or technical finesse. It might as well be Rock'em Sock'em Robots. If the game feels like allowing it, you can foolishly attempt to execute special moves, and it's all the classic maneuvers, the Hadouken, the Hurricane Kick, because Tatsumaku Senpu Kyaku doesn't roll off my tongue exactly, and there's the Shoryuken. They are very damaging moves. They can turn the tide so quickly if you manage to pull them off. Look at how fast I drained this guy's health down.
Alright.
But that right there was just pure luck. I button mashed the fuck out of that because unlike every other Street Fighter game after this game reads button sequences differently. Like the timing's not about when you press the input, but when you let go of the button or some shit like that. So even trying the classic quarter circle forward punch combination is a total crapshoot. And say you do get a feel for it, this game gets fucking impossible by the end. A one-on-one battle with Sagat. Look at that face. It's less like he's a champion of Thailand and more like he's got an allergic reaction to success. Well, too bad for him. He's gonna keep winning. This asshole moves so fast with his jumping knees, his low and high projectiles, and his gargantuan frame. A classic final boss for an arcade fighting game where he's not after your pride, he's after your fucking pocket change. Either way, not much else to talk about here. There's these bonus games where you can either jump kick some wooden boards or karate chop some tiles. I think the third reason people don't often reflect on the original Street Fighter is because it's not a very good game, period. To see how some Street Fighter mainstays got their beginnings here with Ryu, Ken, Sagat, Adon, Gen, and Birdie, that's cool. The game looks okay for a late 80s arcade title, and the music isn't too bad. I actually really like Eagle's theme. But it's up to the game, not so much yourself, on whether or not you have any amount of success or not, because button inputs are a mess, hitboxes are an entirely different can of worms, and the AI can range from a rabid attack dog to poor Birdie here. Alright, how about we head into what might as well be the proper start of the series, Street Fighter 2, where a bunch of people from all across the globe participate in a worldwide tournament. Each fighter has their reasons for participating, but I'll be damned if I remember what those reasons are. I have never cared about Street Fighter's lore. I can admire the fighter as an individual and their personality, but what they're actually doing in this game, I couldn't tell you. Relishing stories in fighting games is not really my forte. I'm not saying they shouldn't be in them. That'd just be a really dumb thing to say. But usually when I'm plugging in a fighting game, it's because I'm about to ram my foot up someone's ass or get my ass kicked. Man, I played the hell out of this game as a kid. This was all I knew growing up, and living in a house with a Super Nintendo, a brother who was just as anxious to play the game, and an uncle who was there to put us in our place. Even my mom at some points got into the action. My mom, who at that point only cared about Tetris, and there she was kicking my ass with Chun-Li. It was a great time, and when we weren't playing at home, there was always an arcade machine nearby because back then they were still rather prevalent, especially in corner stores. 8 fighters were available to choose from. A paltry amount by today's standards, yeah, but what are you gonna do? It's an early 90s fighting game, folks. Ryu and Ken were back in action, but now there was Chun-Li, one of the most badass females in video games, period. The American hero Guile, the Japanese sumo wrestler E. Honda, the Russian bear Zangief, the Brazilian animal Blanca or Blanca. There was always a debate on how this guy's name was pronounced. Then there was Mr. Stretch Armstrong from India himself, Dalsim. It was a diverse cast, bringing their own flavor of combat to the arena, but I was always, and forever will be, a Ken Masters player. I was very young when I played Street Fighter 2, but I clearly remember gravitating towards this guy. Maybe it was the hair, or because he represented the United States, his bright red karate gi, or the cool blue alternate color. He was no different than Ryu in moveset back then, and I enjoy using Ryu on the occasion, but no matter the Street Fighter, I will pick Ken, and it helps that he, along with Ryu, are pretty easy to pick up and play, and unlike Street Fighter 1, I can actually fucking do their special moves on command, and I've won many rounds using these attacks when my opponent was open, whether it was a Brazilian jungle, a Japanese bathhouse, breaking someone's tower of bricks, smashing someone's alcohol barrels, or smashing someone's car. The Street Fighters are assholes. And it was always good to know that you were getting someone when you got to the 4 boss characters. Balrog, the totally not Mike Tyson who didn't even know how to kick. Vega, the obnoxiously fast Spaniard that can grab the cage behind him and deliver a vicious blow to your face. Sagat returned as the penultimate boss, and while he's not hungry for your money as last time, he's still a very tall man with very long reach, and Tiger, uppercut, Tiger! At the end was Bison, the big cheese who wrecked your shit if you were playing on normal difficulty and beyond, which you had to do in order to get ending cutscenes at all. Well, I don't really care about that nowadays. Do I even go back to this game, the very original Street Fighter 2 today? The answer is a clear cut, oh god no. Street Fighter 2 is responsible for setting a lot of standards that many other companies would mimic and tweak in their own ways, but one thing that has not aged well in Street Fighter 2 was its speed. This game is almost unbearably slow, and on the SNES it's prone to a shit ton of lag. I loved this game back then, but this is the main reason why I won't go back to this iteration. I repeat, this iteration, because oh yeah, there's plenty more where that came from. Street Fighter 2 had to be the definitive fighting game of the 90s, which is easy to maintain if you're releasing expansions and updates for it every waking second of the day. That's the most obvious joke to make with Street Fighter, and it's Street Fighter 2 you have to thank for that. This was a time before downloadable content or patches, but Capcom for whatever reason insisted that they just update what already worked,
instead of just making a full-out sequel. Let's put it this way, Street Fighter II was 1991, and the first iteration of Street Fighter III was in 1997. There was Street Fighter II, Street Fighter II Turbo, Street Fighter II Special Champion Edition for the Genesis, which was based off of Street Fighter II Champion Edition on the arcade. There was Super Street Fighter II, and finally Super Street Fighter II Turbo. These updates would tweak a number of things throughout their releases. Starting with Street Fighter II Turbo, you can pick the boss characters in versus matches, and some characters were given extra moves. The speed could be altered for better pacing, but if you input a code at the Capcom logo, you could jack it up to ludicrous speeds. It's borderline unplayable. Super Street Fighter II and Turbo brought along more characters, increasing the total roster size and how long it takes to beat single player as a consequence. It also introduced super combos, which are hard-hitting special attacks you could execute when your special meter was filled. If I'm going back to Street Fighter II, it's with Super Street Fighter II Turbo. And if there's one version I could recommend, it's Super Street Fighter II Turbo HD Remix for the PS3 and Xbox 360. My mouth, it hurts. It's got everything great about Super Street Fighter II Turbo's add-ons with completely redrawn HD sprites, courtesy of Udon Entertainment. I'm a big fan of their work. I've had this promotional image as a poster for nearly 10 years. What's going on with Ryu's chest here? Is that normal for a muscular build? It's like his pecs are trying to escape each other. HD Remix is so gorgeous to look at, though I will admit it's a little weird for me at the same time. The redrawn artwork uses an early 90s fighting game as the basis. While it looks great, the choppy animation of the original Street Fighter II is all the more obvious. The stationary poses, the 2-frame background animations. With sprites this detailed, I'd expect a little more fluidity, but it's really just a shiny coat of paint. A beautiful shiny coat of paint, but nothing more. I still recommend it, it's just a nitpick really. Street Fighter II made me a fan, and thanks to it, I was open to a whole world of other fighting games. Soon I would give games like Fatal Fury a try. I remember spending a considerable amount of time on the art of fighting, and Mortal Kombat speaks for itself. But my love of Street Fighter wasn't merely restricted to video games. I recall the Street Fighter II animated series, which I only caught a few times on TV when I wasn't distracted by Animaniacs or Power Rangers, and I don't remember a whole lot of it, to be honest. I just go back for the delicious intro and Bison saying yes twice in a row in the same dialect. In 1994, there was the Street Fighter live-action movie starring the Belgian actor Jean-Claude Van Damme playing as the American hero Guile and Raul Julia as Bison, and I have no regrets in stating that I'm an unapologetic fan of this movie. I have the fucking Blu-ray for Christ's sakes, and I went to go see this in theaters when it was first released. I was a 7-year-old Street Fighter fan. It's hilariously cheesy. I recommend it if you just want some cornball fun, especially for Raul Julia's performance, rest his soul. And would you know, there was a video game adaptation of the Street Fighter movie. Street Fighter the movie, the game. It started as an arcade game, but I'm more familiar with the console port, seeing as I actually rented this for the PlayStation 1 back when I was all over that damn console. Maybe I should have mentioned it during my PlayStation video. Anyway, this was clearly an attempt to cash in on Mortal Kombat's success because the game decides to use digital motion capture for character sprites, and it looks fucking ridiculous. I don't know, when I see a live-action Guile do a flash kick or a live-action Ken do a hurricane kick, I'm laughing my ass off. To see characters that didn't throw a single punch in the movie suddenly do high flips and shit and shoot fireballs, hey, it's as every bit as corny as the film. So if you love the movie, I don't think it would hurt getting this for your collection. They even added the Japanese general guy Sawada for the film. The guy who had maybe 2 lines in the whole film, and he got his own character slide. What the shit? Look at what kind of super move is that supposed to be? He just slides in place. Like, his insatiable need for a hug is enough to be a fucking super attack. Past all that, it is Street Fighter gameplay-wise. It's got everything that makes Street Fighter what it is, and I think that's what's really important. It's just the digital motion graphics age this game tremendously visually, and even then, they're still not as smooth as Mortal Kombat's digital graphics. Tell me, what do you think Zangief is doing here? This shit isn't a stun animation, that's me trying to blend in a nightclub. While I can enjoy the Street Fighter movie for all its hamminess, there was another Street Fighter movie running on cable at this time, and I'm talking the Street Fighter 2 animated movie. Oh man, this was the fucking shit back then. And I still pop it in every once in a while. It's totally made for Street Fighter fans because let's face it, it's not a very good movie in general. There's no real plot, it's just people fighting for around 90 minutes. But damn it, shit looks great, man. The opening with Ryu and Sagat, Chun-Li kicking the shit out of Vega, Ryu facing off against Fei Long, who was voiced by Bryan Cranston. Come on, it's not every day where I can say I saw a movie where Ryu spin kicked the fucking hell out of Walter White. It's got character done right, it's beautifully animated, and will ultimately serve as the major inspiration for the next lineup of Street Fighter games. And if you think I'm talking about Street Fighter 3, cute. No, I'm talking about Street Fighter Alpha, a prequel series to the Street Fighter 2 storyline. It's known as Street Fighter Zero in Japan. Here we see our favorite Street Fighters during their humble beginnings, a time where Ken had long hair, before Chun-Li traded athletic sports gear for a traditional Chi Pao, and when Bison inflated himself with an air pump. Is this even the same guy? He's like a walking bicycle with teeth. The Alpha series also took the time to bring back characters from the original Street Fighter, so we had the returning Adon, Birdie, and the oldest living man in video games, Gen. Starting with Sodom and Guy, this is also where Capcom decided to bring in characters from their Final Fight lineup, a classic beat-em-up series. This would later extend to guys like Cody and Rolento, but never Mike Hager, probably because Zangief already fits the grappler quota. I'm not too sure on that. But there's plenty of fresh faces to go around as well, and two of my favorite Street Fighter characters of all time were introduced in Alpha. We got Sakura, Ryu's #1 stalker, and Rainbow Mika, a Japanese wrestler who wants to be the very best. I love these two, and Sakura was also one of my top picks in her cameo appearance in Rival Schools. That's another game I'd love to talk about one day. I just gotta find the fucking thing without breaking bank. I played about as much Alpha as I did with Street Fighter 2. I owned Alpha 1 for the PlayStation, and I played a lot of Alpha 3 in arcades before finally getting the console version of that one too. Strangely, I didn't see Alpha 2 a whole lot. It was either Alpha 1 or 3. They're not all much different than Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. There are certainly enhancements, yes, but the emphasis seemed to be strictly on additional characters, graphics, and sound, which I'll say are great. This is where Street Fighter became a little more anime-esque in design. An artistic choice I think helps highlight the younger vibe of Alpha. The characters are younger, hence more energy, and that's how I can describe the Alpha series, energetic. The opening movies are in your face with high-speed graphics. Gameplay can be very fast for Street Fighter standards, particularly in Alpha 3's case with its variety of different combo systems. And speaking of Alpha 3, that damn announcer.
Go for it, man!
By this time, my family was getting older. They were busy doing their own thing, so I had a lot of single-player time with the Alpha games. And with that behind me, fuck Bison in Alpha 3. I mean, the man was already sort of annoyingly hard in other games, but Alpha 3 decides to give him boss powers, that goddamn super move that takes out the whole screen and eats all your health away if you don't block it. I see he too studied the art of monetary fuckery with Sagat, and Alpha 3 really rubs it in your face if you lose to Bison in arcade mode. You don't get a second chance. The game just straight up ends with a city getting destroyed. Like, fuck. If you're going to give the Alpha series a look at, I recommend the Alpha Anthology for the PlayStation 2. It's a collection of arcade-perfect ports of every game in the Alpha lineup, so you don't have to worry about load times and inferior graphics and all that. It's a solid collection. It also has another game I used to rent a lot back when Hollywood Video was a thing, Super Gem Fighter Mini Mix, also known as Pocket Fighter in North America. It's what happens when you take the cutesy designs of Super Puzzle Fighter, a puzzle spin-off, and put them back into a fighting game. It's cute. Character combos have them transforming in all kinds of ways, and it's normally an excuse for some good old-fashioned Capcom fan service. Mega Man, Darkstalkers, Ghost and Goblins. I think Chun-Li transforms into a Star Gladiator character. If you were all over Capcom in the 90s, I think you'll like this game. It doesn't feel as in-depth as normal Street Fighter can be, but I don't think it's supposed to. It's frantic, but pretty fun. But I was technically playing two types of Street Fighter games at around the late 90s, the Alpha series and Street Fighter EX. Plus Alpha. I went into this game during my PlayStation video, but I'll reiterate my experiences here because while I don't think this is a good starting point to jump into the Street Fighter series, I still played a lot of this. It was the series' jump to 3D, but mostly in looks. You rarely interacted with a third dimension in gameplay. I remember not liking some changes they did with some characters' movesets. One that immediately springs to mind was Ken and Ryu's Hurricane Kick. You had to input the command repeatedly to get continuous kicks when it was just one motion in every other game. It's also weird how the character select screen in arcade mode only shows you a select number of characters, with the other choices being off-screen. Whoa, man, if that isn't the biggest booty warrior face I've ever seen Ken give, I don't know what comes close. Well, maybe Adon in Street Fighter Alpha, but Ken's a close second, and Dawson thinks that's A-okay. Street Fighter EX is probably the only Street Fighter where I spent more time on the training mode than any other mode in the game. Well, endings in arcade mode were usually accompanied by 10-second FMVs that demonstrated next to nothing. Here's Sakura sniffing her finger, have a nice day. So there was nothing much to relish in arcade mode, but performing combo challenges in training mode was how you unlocked extra characters. It was infuriating trying to pull off some of these combos because you had like 3 or 4 frames to input the next move before the AI dummy blocked the next attack, and some attacks are just annoying as shit to chain from. How the fuck am I supposed to connect with Sakura's Hadouken as a final attack? It has so much wind-up time in the beginning, and that's without charging it. Alright, sorry. First world Street Fighter problems, I'm aware. There's 3 EX games total. Never played the second one, but I did for a short time own the third one for the PlayStation 2 before trading it for something else. The EX series is the only place you'll get to play as some of these unique fighters like Crackerjack, the superhero Skullomania, and Garuda with all his spiky extrusions. It's an interesting sidetrack in the franchise for me. If I can praise anything wholeheartedly from this spinoff, it's the soundtrack. Here's an annotation for a playlist. It's phenomenal, and I personally love Precious Heart, Guardian of Light, Strange Sunset, and Amusement of Crime the most. Now after EX, this is where I began to wane from Street Fighter a bit. Not from fighting games period, but Street Fighter specifically. specifically. I was now getting into more stylish 2D fighters, mainly from the Marvel vs. Capcom lineup, but I also started playing King of Fighters, and after that I spent some time on Capcom vs. SNK crossover games, and those were pretty good. I know I've said this maybe 6 or 7 times on this channel, but I spent so much time and money on X-Men vs. Street Fighter and Marvel vs. Capcom. I just had so much fun with them. In fact, I had so much fun that I completely ignored the launch of Street Fighter 3. It took Capcom 6 years after Street Fighter 2 to finally make the next numbered sequel, and there I was ignoring the whole thing. Street Fighter 3 had 3 iterations total. Okay, there was the next generation, the first version of the game, Second Impact, and finally Third Strike. Third Strike is where I jumped in around 2006, a whole 7 to 8 years after it came out. And I wish I jumped in sooner, I really do. I used to play this on the Dreamcast a whole bunch, but now there's an online edition available on the 360 and PlayStation 3. A good way to jump in, assuming you don't mind the slightly horrible pixel quality. I think Street Fighter 3 is just one of those games that look better on a CRT, where pixel animation can blend in together for smoother quality. Not that this game absolutely needs it, because hot damn, I love the sprite quality and animation in this sequel. Can you tell by now that I'm just a total graphics whore in fighting games, well, 2D games in general? I love a pretty 2D game, and Street Fighter 3 is pretty. I look at all these maneuvers I pull off, all the way these characters move, and I wonder, god damn, how long did this take to create? I mean, I certainly don't mind Street Fighter 4 and 5 for jumping back to 3D models, and I have my praise for that when I get to it, but 2D sprites? It doesn't get any better than Street Fighter 3 to me, but that's just for Street Fighter. I mean, there's some SNK games that I can, just orgasm over. And in gameplay, this has one of my favorite techniques in all of Street Fighter, parrying, where if you can time directional inputs just right, you can block an attack without taking any small chip damage. It's a high-risk, high-reward mechanic that's incredibly hard to master, but damn satisfying to pull off right. Street Fighter 3 is considered the most technical game in the franchise, a Street Fighter's Street Fighter, if you will. I love it, but I feel I have so much to learn in player matchups, move canceling, buffering, cross-ups, reversals. Tell me, is that how you sell a game to someone who's never played a Street Fighter game? Hell no. There's a lot to absorb in Street Fighter 3, and if you thought Street Fighter 2 was too complex, stay the hell away from Street Fighter 3. I think its technical, enriching gameplay can only be fully enjoyed by fans of Street Fighter who are willing to spend the time on it. In that regard, yeah, it has limited appeal. Maybe that's just one of the reasons why Street Fighter 3 wasn't met with the highest praise at first. It was sort of lambasted at launch. Complex mechanics, outdated graphics at the time, to which I say, okay, what? And it got flack for ditching nearly the whole cast from Street Fighter 2, hence New Generation. And I won't lie, I didn't gravitate towards a lot of these new fighters. Was it nostalgia for the old cast? It most likely was, and having Street Fighter 3 remove so many of them all at once was particularly jarring, but my heart did eventually open up to a few of these guys. Not all of them, but a few. I love the ninja girl Ibuki. I think Makoto is pretty neat despite her tank-like approach in combat, and Dudley's just cool. A British boxer that'll crush your face in and then invite you for afternoon tea later. When I'm thinking of the cast, I also sort of immediately think of the final boss, Gil, though I take no pleasure in that, believe me. Look at this tall motherfucker. Hey, you won't find a more dedicated college football fan, but I really wish he wore a little more than tighty whities. Oh god, I can see everything. And he can resurrect himself if he has a charged super meter when you knock him out. I hate that shit. Ow. Street Fighter 3 did pull me back into my Street Fighter high, so of course in 2008, I was excited for Street Fighter 4. I traded a lot of games just to get my copy on the 360. Unemployment was a bitch, folks. It took a whole 8 years to get from Street Fighter 3 Third Strike to Street Fighter 4, and from what I've researched, Capcom was against the idea of making another numbered sequel since it had been so long since the last iteration of Street Fighter 3. If we're comparing the dates of the first release of Street Fighter 3 to the first release of Street Fighter 4, that's around a 10-year gap. And then they saw the sales performance of Street Fighter 2 Hyper Fighting on Xbox Live and finally decided to give it another go, using experiences from Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo as the basis. So the result was a Street Fighter that wasn't as complicated as Street Fighter 3, sticking closer to the Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo formula, the one responsible for putting the whole series on the map, Street Fighter 4. Later followed by Super Street Fighter 4, Super Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition, and Ultra Street Fighter 4, the latter sporting one of the largest rosters in Street Fighter history. If you follow Street Fighter 4 from the very beginning up until Ultra Street Fighter 4, that's over $100-something you spent on roster updates, balance tweaks, and costumes. I'm not judging for the record. I'm totally guilty of investing in every fucking update myself, and I slightly hate myself for it. By Street Fighter 4, it was a safe bet you were already a fan of the series if you were jumping in, and the main reason why I bought it wasn't just because it was the next Street Fighter game in the current generation, but I could fight other people online, and I did plenty of that, with only a few mental scars here to show for it. As much as I praised Street Fighter 3's 2D sprites, I was also a fan of Street Fighter 4's approach to 3D character models. Everybody's been hitting the gym like a motherfucker. The muscle detail is all gritty and scratchy and burnt. Japanese calligraphy was a big part of the artistic design, so special moves, character actions, and victory screens were often accompanied with brushstrokes, glossy highlights, and pitch black shadows. It was cool, nice on the eyes, and this is where Street Fighter started to get dynamic with camera angles, giving super moves that extra crunch and bravura and appeal. I love the jaw-dropping reactions the opponent gives off when you're just about to smack them with an ultra attack, when you know that shit's about to connect. It's great. Now, I don't remember much of the soundtrack except for the volcanic rim piece, which would, starting with Super Street Fighter 4, become the main theme, replacing Street Fighter 4's original theme, Indestructible, with vocals by Flo Rida. I remember listening to this theme for the first time and thinking, what the hell is this shit? And I don't think it's a bad song when looking back. It's not really a big jump if you think about it. By Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, there was a larger focus on urban-centered music, which I thought worked out fine in that game. They began putting a little more dazzle in arcade mode. Rival fights led to some unique dialogue before the giant slap fest, and stories were told in colorful storyboards at the start, with animations following the end. I thought these were okay, but they are nothing compared to something like the Street Fighter 2 animated movie. And I know that's not really fair to compare it, but this animation does look a little cheap. I guess it's a consequence of having so many characters, but again, I don't really care for the lore, as I'll say a second time, maybe a third time by the end of this video. Ultra Street Fighter 4 shoots for around $20 nowadays, so assuming you didn't already invest in one form of Street Fighter 4 or another, or maybe you're interested in getting into the series, that's an amazing deal. The largest roster of characters with a multitude of alternate costumes and color variations. It's easier to pick up than Street Fighter 3 if you felt that wasn't the one for you. You should get this one. It's a better deal than the alternative option at the moment, which leads us to Street Fighter 5. Okay, so this was a major reason why I wanted to do this video as a retrospective, because if I knew I looked at Street Fighter 5 by itself, it was going to be a 4 to 5 minute video. Fuck, I probably wouldn't even reach that. It's very likely you know the reason why. For $60, Street Fighter 5's current content is less than half the total content in Ultra Street Fighter 4. To be fair, Ultra Street Fighter 4 is the result of over 5 years of development and updates, while Street Fighter 5 just came out a couple of months ago. But $60 is still pretty steep for a game that's clearly not even complete yet. Structurally, it's finished, and in that regard, Street Fighter V was a great addition to the lineup. Now more than ever, the developers tweaked the combat system so that it's easier for new players to get into the game, a choice in design I know will drive some expert players nuts in endless internet wars, but I think it's good they're trying to get more people to play the game, and what they have to look forward to is good. Street Fighter V is very approachable. Give it an hour of your time, you'll learn the basics lickety-split. It even starts with a tutorial when you boot it up for the first time. I don't think any Street Fighter game has done that up until this point, which amazes me. Combos feel easier to execute. The new V-trigger and V-reversal system gives each character additional offensive and defensive options that's easy to see and understand, but at the same time, it also feels like there's enough layers that keep it on the same level as Street Fighter 2 and Street Fighter 4. So whether you're a veteran or new player, both have something to look forward to, and this game is just a colorful marvel. Environments are great, the models are constructed wonderfully, and the texturing and graphic flares really pop out, even if the fighters look like they're made of children's clay on the occasion. Ken, I love you, man, but your hair looks like the shit that comes out of a Play-Doh workshop. But I can always switch back to a more traditional looking Ken when I unlock the alternate costume. But this is the biggest point of contention with Street Fighter V currently, the amount of content immediately available. It's like Splatoon, a game that had a bare as fuck launch that throughout the coming months slowly became a game worth its retail price with free downloadable content and updates. Capcom is approaching Street Fighter V in a similar fashion, where more characters, more stages, and more content will be added that you can purchase from the in-game store with in-game currency you can accumulate by fighting in a shitload of online matches versus matches, or the very minimalistic story mode, which is not even really a story mode, it's more like a prologue mode, setting up the events for Street Fighter V's eventual story mode campaign coming out very soon. But because Capcom also really wants to milk us for all we're worth, they also have the option of a seasonal pass that can give you the new characters immediately when they're released in case you don't feel like playing the game and instead just want to jump in and play the game. I know some of you are thinking, John, you should have just waited a little longer to review this game. Look, full transparency here. I got a review code for this game on the PlayStation 4, and I'm grateful for that, but I'm still annoyed by how little this game offered content-wise back in February, and it's only gotten slightly better since then. They're playing the long game with this one. In terms of content, I know eventually Street Fighter V will become worth its $60 price tag. It's good that you can unlock the content without having to pay a single additional penny, but say as a fan of Street Fighter, you're jumping from Street Street Fighter 4 to Street Fighter 5, it's like moving from a penthouse to a small condo that's still under construction. As a Ken player, and as someone who's glad to see Rainbow Miko return, I'm happy I can spend the time to flex my skills with a couple of characters I love, but where's Sakura? Where's my other favorite characters? Well, I know they're coming, but because Capcom has told me so, but they're not here yet, and as a veteran, I'm bummed. I gotta wait, but I'll stress again, if you haven't played a Street Fighter game yet and are looking for a good starting point, go get Ultra Street Fighter 4. It's very likely you still got your PS3 or Xbox 360 on standby, so give it some love, because Street Fighter 5 is only available on the PlayStation 4 and Steam, and it's $60.
And given how recent Street Fighter V is at the time of this video, I know this outlook is doomed to be outdated very, very soon. For instance, Ibuki's right around the corner, and the game is getting that story mode campaign, which is great for people that care about that sort of thing. I don't, which is why I'm not losing sleep by not covering it. Street Fighter has always been about you, the guy in front of you, and seeing who can clobber the shit out of each other first. And for over 20 years, through different consoles, countless trips to arcade machines, offline with friends, online with competitive players, Street Fighter has been my escape when I want to kick someone's face in a series that's not as super flashy as something from Axis, or super technical as Tekken, or as gore-tastic as Mortal Kombat. I love those games too. I am a fighting game whore. But Street Fighter will always have a place in my heart, and I hope that, should you want to give it a try, no matter where you begin, you have memories and stories to share as well. And with all that said, those heading to Too Many Games this coming weekend, I will see you guys there. And for everyone else, thank you for tuning in. You guys all have a fantastic night, and take care.